You think breakfast sandwiches started with fast food drive-thrus and frozen convenience meals? Think again. Rural American families were crafting brilliant 5-minute breakfast sandwiches long before electric toasters and microwaves existed. Let's dig into 30 forgotten breakfast sandwiches no one makes anymore. Fried egg and fatback biscuit was the working man's fuel that powered countless mornings across Appalachia and the rural South. Fatback, that thick slab of pure pork fat from the pig's back, would be sliced thin and fried in a cast-iron skillet until the edges turned crispy and golden while rendering out precious grease. Into that same bubbling fat went a fresh egg, the whites crisping at the edges while the yolk stayed soft and runny. The whole assembly was placed between halves of a hot buttermilk biscuit, the egg yolk breaking and mixing with the salty pork fat to create a natural sauce that soaked into the bread. This sandwich cost almost nothing to make, yet delivered protein, fat, and carbohydrates in perfect balance. Families kept fatback in the smokehouse or root cellar, ready for any morning when time was short but hunger was real. The combination of crispy pork, creamy egg, and tender biscuit created something genuinely satisfying that no modern breakfast sandwich has managed to replicate. Molasses butter biscuit was a sweet morning treat that sustained generations of children heading off to school or fieldwork. A fresh biscuit, still warm from the wood stove, would be split open and spread generously with butter that melted instantly into the crumb. Then came the molasses. That dark, thick syrup drizzled over the butter until it pooled in the biscuit's crevices. The combination created something between breakfast and dessert, the butter's richness cutting the molasses' intense sweetness. During hard times when sugar was expensive, molasses served as the sweetener of choice for rural families across the South. Children wrapped these sandwiches in cloth napkins, carrying them to one-room schoolhouses where they provided energy through long morning lessons. The taste was bold and distinctive, nothing like the mild sweetness of modern pastries. This sandwich represented care and creativity, proving that even the simplest ingredients could make mornings feel special. Bacon grease toast was pure mountain efficiency, transforming yesterday's cooking fat into today's breakfast in under 3 minutes. After frying bacon, families saved the rendered grease in tin cans kept near the stove, ready for any cooking need. A thick slice of homemade bread would be placed directly in the warm skillet, absorbing the smoky bacon fat until the bottom turned golden and crispy. Flipped once, the bread emerged transformed, carrying the essence of bacon without requiring any actual meat. Some families sprinkled salt or sugar on top, depending on preference. Others ate it plain, letting the rich pork flavor speak for itself. This wasn't poverty food in the shameful sense, but rather brilliant resourcefulness that wasted nothing. The bread's texture became extraordinary, crispy on the outside, yet soft within, infused with smoky richness. Bacon grease toast fed families during lean times and flush times alike, proving great breakfasts needed nothing more than bread and leftover fat. A fried mush sandwich turned yesterday's cornmeal porridge into this morning's crispy breakfast in the time it took to heat a skillet. Leftover cornmeal mush was poured into loaf pans the night before, where it would set firm as it cooled. Come morning, thick slices were cut from the solidified mush and fried in lard or bacon grease until both sides developed a golden crust that crackled when bitten. These crispy slices were placed between bread or simply eaten with syrup poured over top. The texture contrast was remarkable, the exterior shattering to reveal a creamy, corn-sweet interior that brought comfort and sustenance. This sandwich stretched resources brilliantly, turning one pot of mush into multiple meals across 2 days. Farm families across the Midwest and South relied on this transformation, knowing that nothing cooked should ever go to waste. Children especially loved the sweet corn flavor combined with the satisfying crunch, making it a breakfast worth waking early for. Streak a lean biscuit was Appalachian breakfast perfection, featuring that thin-cut salt-cured pork that sat somewhere between bacon and fatback. The meat was sliced from the pig's belly, carrying streaks of lean meat through the fat that gave it both name and character. Fried quickly in a hot skillet, streak a lean rendered its fat while the lean portions crisped and curled at the edges. tucked into a split biscuit with maybe a smear of butter or apple butter, this sandwich delivered salty, smoky satisfaction that powered hours of farm labor. The meat cost less than proper bacon but carried more flavor than plain fatback. Families cured their own streak of lean in smokehouses each fall, ensuring a supply of breakfast meat that lasted through winter and into spring. This sandwich represented the kind of self-sufficiency that defined mountain life, where families raised and preserved their own food. Sawmill gravy biscuit was the quintessential Southern breakfast. Thick white gravy ladled over a split buttermilk biscuit that could be eaten with hands or fork. The gravy started with meat drippings, usually from sausage or bacon, mixed with flour to create a roux that thickened as milk was slowly added. Black pepper provided heat and visual interest, the dark specks scattered through the creamy white sauce. Split biscuits were arranged on plates as the gravy was spooned generously over top, the bread absorbing the rich sauce while maintaining enough structure to be picked up and eaten. This wasn't a sandwich in the traditional sense, but rather an open-faced creation that satisfied hunger like nothing else could. Sawmill workers and loggers depended on this hearty breakfast to fuel brutal physical labor. The gravy stretched a small amount of meat into a meal that fed entire families, proving that ingenuity and skill could multiply resources. Fried apple biscuit brought orchard sweetness to the breakfast table, combining quickly cooked apples with fresh biscuits for a meal that felt almost like dessert. Apples were sliced thin and fried in butter with a sprinkle of sugar and cinnamon until they softened and their edges began to caramelize. The warm fruit was spooned onto split biscuits, the juices soaking into the bread while the apple slices provided tender sweetness. During apple season, this sandwich appeared regularly on farm tables, using fruit that might otherwise go to waste before it could be properly preserved. The preparation took barely 5 minutes, yet created something that children and adults alike looked forward to. Some families added a drizzle of cream or a pat of butter for extra richness. The combination of warm spiced fruit and tender biscuit represented the best of country cooking, where seasonal abundance met morning hunger. Lard and sugar bread was perhaps the simplest forgotten breakfast, nothing more than homemade bread spread with fresh lard and sprinkled with white sugar. The lard provided richness and fat that stuck to ribs during long mornings of work. The sugar added sweetness that made the combination feel almost indulgent. Children especially loved this sandwich, the sugar crystals crunching slightly against the smooth lard and soft bread. Making it took barely a minute, perfect for busy mornings when the wood stove was needed for other cooking. During the Depression and war years, this sandwich fed countless families when other breakfast options weren't available or affordable. The taste seems strange to modern palates accustomed to butter, but for generations raised on lard, this sandwich represented comfort and normalcy. It was food that didn't pretend to be fancy, yet delivered exactly what a body needed to start the day. Cornbread crumble sandwich was a resourceful breakfast that gave yesterday's cornbread new life with nothing more than buttermilk in a bowl. Leftover cornbread was crumbled into chunks, then covered with cold buttermilk until the bread softened but didn't completely dissolve. Some families added a spoon of sugar, others preferred it savory with a pinch of salt. The mixture was eaten with a spoon but carried the same satisfaction as any handheld sandwich. This wasn't elegant food, but rather survival cuisine that wasted nothing and provided genuine nourishment. The tangy buttermilk combined with the sweet cornmeal created a flavor profile that was distinctly Southern and deeply comforting. Farm families ate this during summer months when cold food appealed more than hot biscuits. Children grew up with this as a familiar breakfast option, never questioning its unusual form. The sandwich represented practical wisdom, showing how creativity could transform leftovers into something worth eating. Cracklin biscuit was a celebration of pig butchering season, featuring those crispy bits of rendered pork fat baked right into the bread itself. When families rendered lard, the leftover pieces of fried pork skin and fat became cracklins, crunchy morsels packed with flavor. These were folded into biscuit dough before baking, creating bread that was rich, salty, and satisfying straight from the oven. No additional filling was needed because the cracklins provided all the flavor and fat a body required. Split and buttered while still warm, These biscuits represented abundance during the season when fresh pork was available. The cracklins added textural interest, their crunch contrasting with the tender biscuit surrounding them. Families looked forward to butchering time partly because it meant cracklin biscuits for breakfast. This sandwich connected people to the rhythm of rural life, where food followed seasons and nothing was ever wasted. Sorghum biscuit was the mountain sweetener's answer to fancy breakfast pastries, featuring that thick amber syrup poured over hot split biscuits. Sorghum, pressed from tall cane stalks grown in Appalachian hollows, had a distinctive flavor that was earthier and less refined than molasses or honey. The syrup was drizzled generously over buttered biscuits still steaming from the oven, pooling in the bread's soft interior. Children licked their fingers clean after every bite, savoring the mineral-rich sweetness that no store-bought syrup could match. Families grew their own sorghum cane and pressed it at community mills each fall, creating enough syrup to last through winter. The flavor carried hints of smoke and grass, a taste that connected people directly to the land they worked. This sandwich required nothing fancy, just fresh biscuits and homemade syrup. Yet it delivered satisfaction that modern breakfast treats cannot replicate. Sorghum biscuits represented self-sufficiency and the pride of producing your own sweetness. Fried salt pork sandwich was pure survival food that sustained families when other meat wasn't available or affordable. Salt pork, that heavily cured slab of pork belly preserved in brine, was sliced thin and fried until the fat rendered and the edges turned crispy and golden. The intense saltiness meant a little went far, with just a few slices providing enough flavor and fat to make a satisfying breakfast. Placed between slices of homemade bread or tucked into a biscuit, the salt pork delivered immediate energy and lasting fullness. Families kept barrels of salt pork in cellars and smokehouses, insurance against lean times when fresh meat wasn't possible. The frying process transformed the preserved meat, making it tender inside while developing a crust that crackled between teeth. This sandwich taught important lessons about preservation and resourcefulness. The salt pork might seem too intense for modern palates, but for generations of rural families, it represented security and the comfort of knowing food was always available. Peanut butter and honey biscuit was a protein-packed breakfast that appeared on southern tables once peanut butter became widely available in the early 20th century. The combination seemed simple enough: creamy peanut butter spread on a warm split biscuit with local honey drizzled over top. But the flavors worked together in ways that transcended their humble origins. The peanut butter's richness was cut by honey's floral sweetness, while the tender biscuit provided the perfect neutral base. This sandwich delivered sustained energy that lasted through long mornings of farm work or school lessons. Families kept jars of peanut butter in pantries alongside honey from local beekeepers, two affordable ingredients that together created something genuinely satisfying. Children especially loved this combination, the sweetness making breakfast feel like a treat while the protein kept hunger away until noon. The sandwich could be assembled in under a minute, perfect for busy mornings when time was precious. Egg and onion sandwich was a savory breakfast that stretched resources by adding cheap vegetables to precious eggs. Onions were sliced thin and fried in bacon grease or butter until soft and slightly caramelized, their sharp bite mellowing into sweetness. Eggs were cracked directly into the onions, scrambled together until just set, then piled onto bread or biscuits. The combination was simple, but deeply satisfying, the onion's sweetness complementing the egg's richness in ways that plain eggs couldn't match. This sandwich cost almost nothing extra to make since onions were garden staples that stored well through winter. Farm families ate this regularly, knowing that a handful of onions could transform 2 eggs into breakfast for 4 people. The smell of frying onions filled kitchens each morning, announcing that something good was being prepared. This sandwich represented the practical wisdom of rural cooking, where adding vegetables wasn't about health trends, but about stretching limited resources further. Fried cornmeal cake sandwich was a quick breakfast made from pantry staples that every rural household kept on hand. Cornmeal was mixed with water, salt, and maybe a bit of sugar to form a thick batter that was spooned into a hot greased skillet. The cakes fried quickly, developing crispy golden exteriors while staying tender inside, their corn-sweet flavor needing little enhancement. Eaten between bread slices or simply stacked and drizzled with syrup, these cakes provided carbohydrates and energy for the day ahead. The preparation took barely 5 minutes from mixing bowl to plate, making it perfect for mornings when time was short. Cornmeal was cheap and shelf-stable, available even when other ingredients ran low. Children grew up eating these cakes without complaint, their simple flavor becoming associated with home and comfort. This sandwich proved that breakfast didn't require expensive ingredients, just a hot skillet and the knowledge passed down through generations of country cooks. Cream cheese and jelly sandwich was a Depression-era creation that brought a touch of sweetness to struggling families. Cream cheese, once a luxury, became more affordable as dairy production increased, and spreading it on bread with homemade jelly created something that felt almost fancy. The tangy richness of the cheese balanced the fruit's sweetness perfectly, while soft bread held everything together for easy eating. Children adored this combination, the creamy texture and sweet flavor making breakfast feel like dessert. Mothers made it quickly on rushed mornings, knowing their children would eat it without complaint. The jelly was often homemade from berries picked in summer, preserved in jars that lined pantry shelves through winter. This sandwich represented ingenuity and the determination to make children happy even during hard times. The combination endures today because it genuinely works, the flavors complementing each other in ways that satisfy both young and old palates alike. Fried pie pocket was a portable breakfast that enclosed sweet filling inside crispy fried dough, perfect for eating on the move. Leftover pie filling or stewed fruit was spooned onto circles of biscuit dough, which were then folded and sealed before being fried in hot lard until golden brown. The exterior crackled when bitten, giving way to warm, sweet fruit that had intensified during cooking. Apple, peach, and berry fillings were most common, depending on what was preserved or in season. These pockets could be wrapped in cloth and carried to fields or schoolhouses, providing sweet energy wherever the day took you. Making them required more effort than simple bread sandwiches, but families prepared batches on weekends to last through the week. The fried dough's richness combined with fruit's tartness created something genuinely delicious. Fried pie pockets represented the Southern tradition of turning simple ingredients into food worth remembering. Butter and jam biscuit was the most straightforward of breakfast sandwiches, yet remained a favorite for generations of rural children and adults alike. A hot biscuit, split while still steaming, received a generous pat of butter that melted instantly into the crumb. Then came homemade jam, spooned from jars that lined pantry shelves, spreading easily over the butter-soaked surface. The combination was sweet, rich, and comforting, each bite releasing the flavor of whatever fruit had been preserved during summer months. Strawberry, blackberry, and peach were favorites, though any fruit could become jam when sugar and cooking time combined. This sandwich required no cooking beyond the biscuits themselves, making it perfect for mornings when the stove was needed for other purposes. Children often assembled their own, learning kitchen skills through this simple task. The butter and jam biscuit was democratic food that appeared on tables regardless of family wealth, beloved because it genuinely tasted wonderful. Tomato sandwich on toast was a summer breakfast that celebrated garden abundance when fresh tomatoes ripened faster than families could eat them. Thick slices of ripe tomato, still warm from morning sun, were placed on toasted bread spread with mayonnaise and sprinkled with salt and pepper. The tomato's juice soaked into the toast, creating a slightly soggy texture that was part of the sandwich's appeal. Nothing else was needed or wanted because a perfectly ripe tomato required no enhancement beyond salt to bring out its natural sweetness. This sandwich appeared only during those few weeks when gardens overflowed with fruit, making it seasonal and special. Farmers ate these standing at kitchen counters, the juice running down their chins as they fueled up before heading back to work. Children learned to love fresh tomatoes through this simple preparation. The tomato sandwich represented the connection between table and garden that defined rural life. Oatmeal bread toast was a hearty breakfast that featured homemade bread enriched with cooked oatmeal for extra nutrition and density. The bread was sliced thick and toasted over the fire or in a dry skillet until the exterior crisped, while the oatmeal-studded interior stayed chewy and moist. Spread with butter, honey, or jam, this toast provided sustained energy that lasted through hours of physical labor. The oatmeal added texture and nutrition, stretching flour supplies while creating something more substantial than regular bread. Farm wives baked this bread regularly, knowing it would keep their families fuller longer than lighter loaves. Children often preferred it to plain bread because the oatmeal added slight sweetness and interesting texture. This toast could be prepared in minutes once the bread was baked, making it practical for busy mornings. Oatmeal bread toast represented the kind of thoughtful cooking that characterized rural households where every ingredient was chosen for purpose. Hoe cake and syrup sandwich was the original fast food of rural America, cooked on griddles or even the flat side of a hoe over open fires. Cornmeal mixed with water and salt formed a simple batter that was poured onto hot greased iron and cooked until golden on both sides. The resulting cake was dense and slightly gritty, with a corn-sweet flavor that needed only syrup to become breakfast. Sorghum, molasses, or cane syrup would be drizzled over the hot cakes, soaking into the surface and pooling in the crevices. This sandwich could be assembled in under 5 minutes using ingredients that every rural household kept on hand. Field workers ate hoe cakes standing up, the portable nature making them perfect for mornings when there was no time to sit. Children learned to make hoe cakes young, the simple recipe serving as their introduction to cooking. The name itself carried history, connecting generations to a time when cooking happened wherever work took you. Egg in a hole was a clever breakfast that used a single slice of bread and one egg to create something greater than either ingredient alone. A circle was cut or torn from the center of a bread slice, and the bread was placed in a buttered skillet where an egg was cracked directly into the hole. As the bread toasted, the egg cooked, the white setting while the yolk stayed soft if you timed it right. The cutout circle was fried alongside, becoming a crispy bonus for dipping into the runny yolk. This sandwich wasted nothing and delivered protein and carbohydrates in perfect proportion. Children especially loved it because the presentation felt special and the eating was interactive. Farm families made this when eggs were plentiful, but time was short, the single-pan preparation making cleanup simple. The combination of crispy bread edges, soft egg, and butter created something genuinely delicious that required no additional ingredients to feel complete. Fried Bologna biscuit was working-class breakfast perfection, featuring that thick-sliced processed meat that became something entirely different when it hit a hot skillet. The Bologna was scored around the edges to prevent curling, then fried until the outside caramelized and the edges turned crispy while the center stayed tender. Tucked into a split biscuit with maybe a smear of mustard or a slice of cheese, this sandwich delivered smoky, salty satisfaction that powered morning labor. Bologna cost far less than bacon or country ham, but provided similar richness when properly prepared. Families bought it by the roll from country stores, slicing it thick for breakfast. The frying transformed what many considered cheap lunch meat into something genuinely appealing, the rendered fat creating flavor that plain cold Bologna couldn't match. This sandwich represented practical wisdom about making affordable ingredients taste good through proper cooking technique. Apple butter biscuit was autumn concentrated into breakfast form, featuring that slow-cooked spread that families made during harvest season. Apple butter required hours of stirring as apples cooked down with sugar and spices into a thick, dark spread with intense fruit flavor. Slathered on a hot split biscuit, the apple butter melted slightly, its cinnamon and clove notes mingling with the bread's butter. This sandwich tasted like fall mornings and orchard work, connecting families to the seasonal rhythm of rural life. Making apple butter was often a community event, with neighbors gathering around large copper kettles to take turns stirring. The finished product was canned in glass jars that lined pantry shelves, providing breakfast sweetness through winter. Children grew up associating apple butter with comfort and family gatherings. This sandwich required no cooking beyond the biscuits themselves, making it perfect for busy mornings. Cheese toast was a quick breakfast that transformed ordinary bread into something rich and satisfying with nothing more than heat and dairy. A thick slice of cheese, usually whatever hard cheese the family had on hand, was placed on bread and held near the fire or placed under a stove lid until the cheese melted and began to bubble. The result was bread with a golden, slightly crispy cheese topping that stretched and pulled with every bite. Some families added a sprinkle of pepper or a dab of mustard before melting. Others kept it simple, letting the cheese speak for itself. This sandwich cost almost nothing extra, since cheese was often homemade from surplus milk. The preparation took barely 3 minutes, yet delivered protein and fat that sustained through morning chores. Children adored cheese toast because the stretchy melted cheese felt almost like playing with food. The sandwich proved that breakfast didn't need complexity to feel genuinely special and satisfying. Potato biscuit sandwich was a filling breakfast that stretched precious flour by adding mashed potatoes directly into the biscuit dough. The potatoes made the biscuits tender and moist, with a slightly sweet flavor that distinguished them from regular biscuits. These were split and filled with whatever the family had available, from fried eggs to country ham to simple butter and jam. The potato content meant these biscuits stayed fresh longer and provided more sustenance than flour-only versions. Farm families especially valued this recipe because potatoes were plentiful from root cellars while flour had to be purchased from general stores. Children often couldn't tell the difference from regular biscuits, making this an easy way to stretch ingredients without complaints at the breakfast table. The sandwich represented practical kitchen wisdom, where resourcefulness meant adding cheap ingredients to expensive ones without sacrificing taste or texture. Sardine and cracker sandwich was a portable breakfast that required no cooking and could be assembled anywhere there was a flat surface. Canned sardines packed in oil or mustard were laid on saltine crackers and eaten in quick bites that provided protein and fat for the morning ahead. The combination might seem strange for breakfast, but for fishing communities and coastal families, sardines were as natural a morning food as eggs. The fish provided omega fatty acids and sustained energy, while the crackers added crunch and carbohydrates. This sandwich could be packed in lunch pails and eaten cold hours later without losing appeal. Families kept canned sardines in pantries as insurance against mornings when nothing else was available or when there was no time for cooking. The saltiness satisfied cravings while the protein kept hunger away until noon. Children grew to appreciate this breakfast through repeated exposure. Grits cake sandwich turned leftover grits into crispy breakfast patties that could be eaten between bread or simply stacked with syrup poured over top. Cooked grits were spread in pans and refrigerated until firm, then sliced into rounds or squares and fried in butter or bacon grease until golden crusts formed on both sides. The exterior crackled while the interior stayed creamy, creating textural contrast that made each bite interesting. These cakes were placed between toast or biscuits, sometimes with cheese or eggs added for extra substance. The transformation from porridge to patty stretched one pot of grits into 2 separate meals across 2 days. Southern families relied on this technique to waste nothing while creating variety in their breakfast routine. Children who resisted plain grits often loved the fried version because the crispy edges made eating feel more like a treat than a chore. Honey butter toast was a simple pleasure that required nothing more than bread, butter, and local honey mixed together into a spread. The honey and butter were blended until smooth, creating a spread that was both sweet and rich, melting instantly on warm toast. The combination delivered immediate energy from the honey's natural sugars, while the butter provided fat that sustained through longer mornings of work. Families kept crocks of honey butter on tables during winter months when quick energy was needed before heading out into cold. Children spread it thick on their toast, the sweetness making breakfast feel celebratory even on ordinary days. Making honey butter took just minutes but elevated plain toast into something worth anticipating. The recipe varied by household, with some adding cinnamon and others keeping it pure. This simple sandwich connected breakfast to beehives and butter churns. Redeye gravy biscuit was a southern specialty that transformed country ham drippings into a thin, intensely flavored sauce perfect for soaking into fresh biscuits. After frying slices of salty country ham, black coffee was poured into the hot skillet, creating a sizzling gravy that captured all the fond from the pan. The mixture was thin and deeply savory with a slight bitterness from the coffee that balanced the ham's salt. Split biscuits received both the ham slices and generous spoonfuls of the Redeye gravy, creating layers of flavor that satisfied like nothing else could. The coffee addition was actually brilliant chemistry, the acids helping to deglaze the pan while adding complexity. This breakfast fueled farmers and mill workers facing hard physical labor. The gravy stretched a few slices of ham into a meal for the whole family, proving that technique and tradition could multiply resources. You knew the Red Devil logo before you ever tasted it. That Underwood deviled ham can have a certain energy to it, bold, strange, and just a little too happy for what was inside. Still, one taste and you got it. Deviled ham salad was the low-key hero of school lunches and late-night sandwiches. It was creamy, salty, a little tangy, and just weird enough to make you wonder how it became so popular. Mix that canned meat paste with mayonnaise and relish, maybe a dash of mustard if you were daring, and you had a spread that knew how to work a slice of white bread. It was chilled, it was comforting, and it stuck to the roof of your mouth like a secret you could not wait to tell. This was the kind of sandwich you did not brag about, but secretly loved. And it was there for you, on road trips, in brown bags, and even at midnight when you could not sleep. It never looked fancy, but it never needed to. Deviled ham was a flavor bomb dressed up like a cold cut. But if you wanted something a little fresher, a little more deli-style, then nothing hit quite like a stack of corned beef with a side of slaw and just enough spice to make you pay attention. Sardine and mustard sandwiches were the bold, fearless meals grandparents made when they wanted flavor, nutrition, and thrift. All at once, sardines came in tins that waited on the pantry shelf like hidden treasures. Salty and tender with enough natural oil to feel restaurant-rich, grandparents mixed them with mustard, sometimes adding onions or a splash of vinegar, and spread the mixture with the confidence of someone making a seafood cafe special. And honestly, it tasted like it belonged there. Sardines had that deep, briny flavor that made the sandwich feel worldly and far more expensive than it was. These meals filled you up and stayed in your memory long after, teaching you something about trying foods that looked humble but tasted big. Grandparents valued strong flavors, meals that woke you up and proved that good food was about skill, not money. Sardine and mustard sandwiches were a small act of boldness and a thrifty masterpiece. Roasted coffee-glazed pork sandwich wasn't a thing of indulgence. It was what you did when the camp coffee was bitter, the sugar was crusted at the bottom of the bag, and the pork belly needed cooking before the flies caught wind. Cowboys would brew up a dark pot of yesterday's coffee, reduce it with sugar, and brush it onto the pork before setting it over the coals. The glaze would sear into the fat, giving it a bark that was smoky, sweet, and slightly burnt like all good trail food ought to be. Once roasted and cooled, slices were shaved thin, if you had a knife sharp enough, and stacked between two hunks of bread or biscuit. The bitterness of the coffee mixed with the pork's salt and fat in a way that stuck with you, both in flavor and in memory. Sometimes they'd add a ring of raw onion or a smear of mustard if a tin was rolling around in a saddlebag. But more often it was just meat and bread and the taste of fire. Out on the trail, this was the closest thing to a delicacy a man might ever know. Cooked chicken livers mixed with onions and spices came together to create the chicken liver sandwich. Now, out of all the ones on the list, this one has probably stood the test of time the most rigidly. You'll still find it in the odd bistro or cafe here and there. Preparing it is a bit of work, but for those who want to expand their sandwich arsenal, this is a worthy addition. You'll need celery, red onions, curry powder, salt and pepper, and lettuce of your choice. Once you've mixed your meat with your vegetables and spices, it's time to get cooking in a 350-degree skillet and mix well. Once it's all ready, assemble your sandwich and see just why this was so popular around the 1940-1960s. Leftover roast vegetable sandwiches were the kind of meal grandparents made when they refused to let anything go to waste. After dinner, they would gather whatever vegetables were left in the pan, fry them up in a little oil or leftover drippings, and stack them high between slices of bread. Carrots, potatoes, onions, squash, and anything else that happened to be sitting in the bowl all came together into something far better than you expected. The heat revived them, bringing back the flavors that had dulled after sitting out, and the bread turned it into a portable, handheld feast. It tasted warm, smoky, and rich. like something you would order from a corner cafe that prided itself on rustic charm. Grandparents knew how to stretch leftovers into entirely new meals, and this sandwich was one of their greatest hits. It was cheap, filling, and comforting, giving you a whole second dinner out of what everyone else would have thrown away. Eating it reminded you that grandparents never needed a recipe to impress you. They just needed a skillet, a little oil, and the sense to know that food could always be made new again. These sandwiches were thick, messy, and unforgettable, carrying with them the memory of kitchens where nothing was ever wasted and everything was always used with care. Pickles come in pairs with olives, so it is only right to mention cream cheese and olive sandwiches next. Cream cheese was an ingredient that was already a staple in many American homes because of its popularity in desserts around the 1970s. Olives are, well, olives, and if you do not have a bottle always ready to go, you need to reevaluate your grocery shopping list for this month. Mixing the two made both substantially better, like those power-ups Iron Man gets whenever he puts on a bulkier suit. If people felt really fancy, they would put the olives on the stove for a while and have them fried. Not only was it great on its own, but people also did not stop at just frying. Both of them made for really awesome toppings on meat-based sandwiches. We would not mind seeing more olives on our plate today for sure. They are a classic we feel work in any era. Now this one came out of left field, unless you grew up near a Chinatown diner. The egg foo young sandwich was one of those things that made 0 sense on paper, but the second you took a bite, you stopped asking questions. Start with an egg patty, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with bean sprouts, green onions, maybe a little chopped pork or shrimp if you got the good kind. Then came the gravy. Not just poured, but drenched. Thick brown gravy ladled right over the patty until it practically dripped off the sides. Slide the whole thing into a hamburger bun, close it up, and prepare yourself for the kind of meal that laughs in the face of napkins. It was heavy, hot, and heartwarming. The egg foo young sandwich felt like the kind of invention you only make when you are really hungry and just messing around in the kitchen. But in the 1970s, this was a lunchtime legend for anyone who knew where to find it. Of course, if you were not lucky enough to live near a place that served one of these, you probably grew up with something even saltier, way more military, and still showing up on diner menus today. These are as basic as they sound and much better than you might initially give them credit for. Be realistic and think about a post-Depression era America where a lot of neighborhoods and homes were still reeling from the effects. Dollars could buy a bit more and went back to their usual strength, but everything was a bit touch and go for a while, and dishes like sardine and mustard sandwiches were the cure. Even more attractive than the taste was the price of this beauty, because for about $1.50 you had yourself a solid meal. Many labor workers, like your friendly neighborhood forklift or dock workers, might remember eating these during their lunch breaks. People would usually spice it up with other vegetables, toppings, and peppers to make a proper feast out of a cheap thrill. And we would like to join the fun too. Corned beef hash sandwiches were the kind of meal that made you feel like you were sitting in a greasy spoon diner, even if you were just sitting at your grandparents' old wooden table. Corned beef hash had that unmistakable sizzle, that pan-fried aroma that filled the entire kitchen and made you feel hungry. Even if you had just eaten, grandparents would crisp it up just right, letting it brown at the edges and soften in the center until it tasted like something straight off a restaurant griddle. Then they would press it between slices of bread, flattening it slightly so the heat melted everything together in this satisfying, hearty way. The sandwich was salty, savory, warm, and deeply filling. It tasted like a blue-collar morning, the kind of breakfast you would grab before a long day of work. But when grandparents made it, it was more than fuel. It was a piece of their own memories, carried forward into yours. Corned beef hash sandwiches were cheap, simple, and unforgettable because they felt like a meal with history behind it. Every bite tasted like the countless mornings grandparents woke early, cooked quickly, and made sure everyone started the day full. They transformed canned or leftover hash into something that tasted miles above its humble ingredients. The bacon and peanut butter sandwich was one that caught our eyes the most. Crispy bacon paired with peanut butter sounded like a combination that could just work somehow. This was a no-brainer for Americans. If their left kidney is sustained by peanut butter, the right is sustained by bacon. Both together probably provide just the right amount of fuel to get through the day or a grueling 9 to 5 shift. A great condiment to go with this is unsweetened ketchup, because most ketchups today have artificial sweeteners. This isn't as popular as it used to be, but it hasn't declined enough in renown that it's that outlandish of an idea. Give it a try some weekend, you might be pleasantly surprised. Sautéed or caramelized onions provide just the right complementary flavor to the crispy bacon, while also not overloading your taste buds because of the peanut butter. Fried cabbage and bacon foldovers were a skillet-born miracle. You would chop cabbage thin, let it sizzle in bacon grease until it browned and softened, then stuff it between 2 rough cakes of bread or griddle-made flapjacks. The bacon was not always visible, sometimes it was just the ghost of flavor left behind in the pan. But the mix was hot, filling, and surprisingly addictive. Cabbage was cheap, easy to grow, and hard to ruin, which made it a favorite for chuck wagons and frontier kitchens alike. Fold it over, wrap it in paper or cloth, and it would hold up for a full day's ride or labor in the field. This was comfort food before the word existed. Every bite had that buttery, smoky taste of bacon and the soft sweetness of cabbage turned golden. You did not need cheese or sauce, just fire and timing. It was the kind of sandwich that made the best of what little you had and taught you to never waste a scrap of flavor. Now this one had drama. The tuna boat melt was not just a sandwich, it was an event. You start with a sub roll, soft in the middle, split open like it is waiting for a miracle. In goes a scoop of tuna salad, but not the watery kind. This was chunky, mayo-rich, maybe with a little celery if you were lucky. Then come the tomato slices, thin, juicy, and laid down like armor. And finally, cheddar cheese, shredded, sliced, whatever worked, blanketing the whole thing like a warm hug. Slide the whole sandwich under a broiler and wait. That is the moment things change. The edges of the bread crisp up, the cheese bubbles and browns, and the tomato softens just enough to soak into the tuna. You pull it out just in time to stop it from burning, but almost wish it had. This was the sandwich version of comfort food theater. It smelled like warmth. It looked like golden perfection. It tasted like something way fancier than it was. Parents made it to use up tuna, but kids remembered it like a feast. But if this one was golden, wait until you meet the sandwich that vanished from lunch counters just as fast as it appeared. Cold meatloaf sandwiches were the unsung heroes of leftover night. The kind of meal that made you forget leftovers did not always have to feel like a downgrade. A slice of meatloaf, chilled just enough to hold its shape, was placed between soft bread and topped with mustard, ketchup, or whatever condiments were around. Grandparents knew the trick. Cold meatloaf had flavor that settled in overnight, making every bite taste even better than it did the day before. The sandwich felt like something you would order from a deli, thick, meaty, and packed with flavor that did not need any heating up. It was the definition of cheap food tasting expensive. Grandparents sliced it with the kind of confidence that came from thousands of meals served over a lifetime, and they always knew exactly how thick the slice needed to be to make the sandwich perfect. You would bite into it and suddenly remember how good simple food could be. Cold meatloaf sandwiches were proof that leftovers could shine, that yesterday's dinner could become today's comfort, and that grandparents had a way of making everything feel just a little better with the right touch. Most of the lovers of chicken salad and grape sandwiches dwindled a lot over the years, and now it is just a memory. No one does comfort food better than Americans, and the iconic potato chips and cheese sandwich is proof. People would grab cheddar or mozzarella cheese and a packet of Frito-Lays or a can of Pringles and get busy at the table but not in the kitchen. Reason being, this was one of those 10-minute dishes that took absolutely no effort or time to make, like instant noodles. Barbecue-flavored chips would be preferred, because they added a secondary flavor, but all kinds were used and the crunch was just to die for. In the 1970s, chips like Pringles were getting more and more popular in America, and that made it even easier for this to take center stage. What would follow in the decades after was a growing concern for health, and people stopped making their favorite potato chips and cheese sandwiches, but we would love a 70s plate. Crispy pancake sandwich with dried peach butter was the kind of breakfast for dinner trick that made even the leanest pantry feel like a treat. Folks would fold up a pair of thin griddle cakes, sometimes crisped on cast iron until the edges curled and browned, and smear the inside with dried peach butter, if they had it. The butter was a stretch of summer sealed in a jar, made from boiled down fruit leather and a little sugar if it could be spared. The pancakes acted like an edible envelope, trapping sweetness that softened the wear of hard living. It wasn't just kids who loved it. Tired men coming in from chopping wood or herding cattle would bite in with a kind of silent gratitude. The butter would melt ever so slightly from the residual heat of the pancake, and suddenly the air smelled like sun-warmed orchards. Sometimes folks added a pinch of salt or a dab of lard for depth. And if the peach butter ran out, they used plum or apple, or even mashed dried prunes if that's what was left. It was comfort disguised as necessity, a pocket of hope you could hold in your hand. You know it is serious when your childhood lunch starts with a loud sizzle. Fried bologna and mustard was never supposed to be a star. It was just something people made when they ran out of ideas or groceries. But it had that wild card charm. Thick-cut bologna, the kind with that red plastic skin you had to peel off, got tossed on a hot skillet until it puffed like a mini volcano. It would curl at the edges, crispy and brown, and just when you thought it was done, it would start to sing. Slap that onto a slice of Wonder Bread, squeeze on yellow mustard like you mean it, and top it with another slice. No lettuce, no tomato, no distractions. This was the sandwich that knew what it was. It smelled like school lunches and weekend trips to the lake. It was cheap, easy, and always hit the spot. Nobody was trying to impress anybody with this. But somehow, it never let you down. The meat might have been humble, but it had attitude, and the mustard made sure it got noticed. Now, if that one felt like a memory, wait until we talk about the sandwich that brought the diner straight to your house, griddle grease and all. Peanut butter and banana sandwiches were the closest thing to dessert you could get without anyone calling it dessert. Grandparents mashed the banana until it blended into the peanut butter, making this sweet, velvety spread that could brighten even the plainest slice of bread. It was cheap, filling, and tasted like something that should have come from a bakery instead of a quiet kitchen. Sometimes they warmed the banana or toasted the bread just enough to make everything melt together in that gooey, comforting way that stayed with you. It was a sandwich that tasted like effort, even though it cost almost nothing. Grandparents knew how to turn 3 ingredients into something that felt special, and this sandwich was proof. It reminded you of slow afternoons and simple comforts that feel distant now. Maybe that is why people still crave it today. Grandparents did not measure or follow rules. They just mashed, stirred, and spread until it felt right. And somehow, it always was. Peanut butter and banana sandwiches were a treat disguised as lunch, a bit of love disguised as food. Bologna and potato salad sandwiches were just as effective at getting the entire family on the table and doubling as the perfect school lunch for your kid. Grade 5 or high school, none of that mattered, because even adults well into their career enjoyed these. People working long jobs would pack a bologna and potato salad sandwich in their backpack to ensure all their food needs were met. Often you would come into a home around the afternoon and find kids glued to the TV with a bologna and potato salad sandwich in hand. Mixing in some chicken chunks or chips would only upgrade an already stellar dish, and we definitely want potato salads and this sandwich to make a comeback. Potato salad sandwiches were the kind of meal that made perfect sense to grandparents, even if they surprise people now. Leftover potato salad never went to waste. It became a cool, creamy filling tucked between slices of bread, turning into something far richer than the cost behind it. The soft potatoes, the dressing, the crunch of onions or celery all blended into a hearty mixture that felt surprisingly complete. It tasted like a picnic you could hold in your hand, like summer afternoons and easy, familiar gatherings. Grandparents understood how to stretch food, and potato salad was one of those dishes that could go further than anyone expected. The sandwich was inexpensive, satisfying, and comforting in that quiet way their meals always were. They had a talent for turning yesterday's leftovers into something worth remembering, and this sandwich was one of their simplest successes. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. Elvis did not invent the grilled peanut butter and banana sandwich, but he sure made it famous. This was a sandwich with soul. It started simple: 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick slather of peanut butter, and banana slices lined up like records on a shelf. Then, just when you thought it was done, someone threw it on a griddle with butter until it crisped and caramelized into something magical. The peanut butter melted, the banana got warm and gooey, and the outside toasted to golden brown perfection. It was sweet, salty, sticky, and just a little over the top, like every good memory from a Saturday morning. Whether you were 5 or 50, this sandwich hit all the right notes. Some people added honey, others tossed in bacon, and a few adventurous souls even threw in some cinnamon. But the classic version stood tall, proud, and a little indulgent. It was the kind of sandwich your aunt made when she wanted to spoil you without breaking the bank. It filled you up, slowed you down, and made you feel like life was okay, if only for a moment. But if you thought Elvis had taste, wait until you see what happens when Spam and pineapple get tossed into the same sandwich and actually make sense. Potted meat sandwiches were born from pantry shelves that never had much but always had enough. That small can of potted meat, easy to overlook today, was once a dependable meal when money had to stretch farther than anyone wanted to admit. Grandparents mixed it with diced onions or pickles to give it flavor that felt almost gourmet. Spread thick on soft bread, it became the kind of sandwich you relied on when time or money were running low. Potted meat had this salty, savory richness that tasted like a diner sandwich when seasoned just right. Grandparents knew how to make a can feel like a full meal, how to make you feel like nothing was missing, even if life was difficult. Eating it felt like stepping back into a kitchen built on hope and habit. They opened the can, mixed it by instinct, and served it without fuss. That simplicity was part of its charm. Potted meat sandwiches were built on resilience, care, and the belief that flavor does not depend on wealth. Pinto bean patties on cornbread slabs were what happened when meat ran out, but pride did not. You would mash yesterday's beans, season them with onion or lard, and fry them into rough little cakes. Then you slapped them between thick slices of cornbread, maybe dry, maybe still warm if you were lucky. It was heavy, filling, and shockingly good. Pinto beans were the backbone of frontier food, cheap, storable, and full of the kind of energy you needed for long days and longer nights. The patties crisped up on the outside but stayed creamy inside, making them feel almost indulgent. Cornbread was dry by the next day, but once you stacked it with beans and fried edges, it came alive again. This sandwich fed whole families when flour was low and meat was gone. It was about turning scraps into something hot, fried, and filling. Something you could eat with 2 hands and still taste an hour later. Spam and pineapple sandwiches, on the other hand, are a Hawaiian invention that makes some stomachs less audible. On the other hand, if you are anything like us, then maybe the blend of spices, fruits, and canned pork and ham will create a unique flavor trip for you. Spam and pineapple sandwiches in the state of Hawaii would usually be accompanied with things like mango slices or mango chutney, peppers, chili pastes, and fresh coleslaw. All of this really elevated the dish and gave it a strong identity to pull from when it was making impressions on people for the first time in the 70s, and most were good ones. While pineapples are eternally hated in America, this is one mix of different foods that a lot of citizens could get in line for, and that is why we are sad to see this one gone. Imagine being 8 years old and opening your lunchbox to find chopped olive and cream cheese on pumpernickel. Either your mom was ahead of her time, or she found an old cocktail recipe card and just went with it. This sandwich was salty, tangy, creamy, and somehow kind of grown up. You had green olives chopped so fine they could sneak into your taste buds before your brain caught on, mixed with cream cheese until it was a spread so thick it stuck to the knife like it had a mission. All of that smeared onto a slice of deep dark pumpernickel that practically demanded you respect it. It was not flashy, it was not sweet, and no kid was trading their cookie for it, but it had an edge, the kind of flavor that got better the more you chewed. Somewhere along the way, this party appetizer snuck into lunchboxes, Tupperware, and even a few kitchen counters at 2 in the morning. It was strange, but it made sense. The 70s were weird like that. Spreads were suddenly sandwiches and finger food was fair game. Of course, if you thought cold spreads were wild, wait until you see what happens when tuna salad goes face to face with a broiler. Fried Bologna sandwiches were the kind of magic only grandparents could pull off. The sort of everyday wizardry that took a slice of cheap meat and turned it into something that tasted like it belonged on a downtown diner plate. You would hear that skillet pop and hiss before you ever smelled it, and somehow that alone felt like a promise. Thick-cut Bologna would curl as it hit the heat, browning until it took on that deep, savory flavor that made you forget it came from the bargain bin at the grocery store. Grandparents had this uncanny way of making simple food feel big and comforting, as if they knew exactly how to turn thrift into warmth. They would press it down with a spatula like they were working a grill at a lunch counter, then drop it onto warm bread slicked with mustard or mayonnaise. Sometimes they added a slice of cheese that melted just enough to glue everything together, and that tiny detail made the sandwich feel like a special order. Maybe it was the sizzling sound. Maybe it was the smoky smell. Or maybe it was the way grandparents cooked everything as if it were meant to matter. That sandwich was cheap and unassuming, yet the moment you bit into it, you knew it had found a permanent spot in your personal Hall of Fame. Buffalo jerky sandwiches were not about tenderness. You would soak the dried meat in water or coffee until it gave up a little of its resistance, then layer it between flatbread or slap it over beans and mustard. It was a food made for teeth and silence. The flavor was smoky, wild, and as tough as the men who chewed it. Buffalo meat had fed tribes and wagon trains alike, but by the late 1800s, finding it meant you either hunted it yourself or knew someone who did. Most of the jerky was homemade, pounded thin with rocks and left to dry on sun-baked hides. Sandwiches made from it were makeshift, but they packed a punch of flavor that stayed with you long after the meal was gone. If you had pickles or wild onion, you might toss some in. If not, you chewed and waited for the salt to wake you up. It was a taste that belonged to open skies and stolen time. If you've ever walked the streets of downtown New York, I'm sure you're familiar with the infamous pastrami on rye. If your grandma's from the Big Apple, chances are her recipe is highly regarded. This sandwich became a staple in Jewish delis in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, thanks to Eastern European immigrants. This one just featured an old-fashioned slice of pastrami on rye bread and a dollop of mustard. Grandma knew that when it came to sandwiches, sometimes less is more, and pastrami on rye is the perfect example of that. But hey, don't forget no pastrami on rye is complete without a pickle on the side. The tartness of a dill pickle or the sweetness of a bread and butter pickle is the perfect contrast to the savory pastrami. Creamed chipped beef on toast, or as anyone who ever served in the military will tell you, SOS. No, not a cry for help, though it looked like one. This was dried beef, shredded and stirred into a thick, milky white sauce with a bit of pepper and sometimes a touch of Worcestershire if you were fancy. Then it got spooned over toast, or biscuits, or whatever bread you had. It was a direct descendant of World War II rations. But by the 1970s, it had made its way into American homes, school cafeterias, and greasy spoon diners across the country. It was salty. It was creamy. It looked like a mistake, but somehow it kept getting made and loved. It was affordable, filling, and tasted better than it had any right to. Parents made it because it used cheap pantry ingredients. Diners served it with coffee refills. Kids ate it because they did not know any better, then grew up craving it again. It might not be pretty, but it is unforgettable. Still, not everything on this list is heavy. Some sandwiches were just simple, clever ways to use what was left on the breakfast table, and a little sweet on the side. Butter and sugar sandwiches were the quiet little treat that felt like a celebration even when there was nothing special going on. Grandparents would take soft white bread, spread a generous layer of butter across it, and sprinkle just enough sugar to make it sparkle. Toast it lightly, and suddenly you had something that tasted like pastry from a bakery window. The butter melted into every corner of the bread, and the sugar turned into this delicate crunch that made the whole thing feel indulgent, despite being made from the simplest ingredients in the kitchen. It was sweet, without trying too hard, comforting without being heavy, and somehow tasted like more than the sum of its parts. When grandparents handed it to you warm, you felt like you were being given a secret treasure, one of those homemade miracles that adults forget about but kids remember forever. It was cheap, but it never tasted cheap. The flavor made you feel like you were eating dessert, even though it was technically just bread, butter, and sugar. Maybe that is why it stuck with so many people. It was the taste of being young, of having someone take the time to make you something small but meaningful. Butter and sugar sandwiches were proof that the simplest foods could make the biggest memories, and that a tiny bit of sweetness could carry you a long way. Which forgotten breakfast sandwich would you revive in your own kitchen? Drop your favorite memory in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe so we can keep serving up the delicious flavors history forgot.